Do you believe madness can be manufactured? Today, you'll learn the story of a woman who was silenced with a stamp, locked away with a diagnosis, and erased with a seemingly indisputable report. She said her father was alive. The family said it was delirium. The hospital said she was dangerous, and the papers said everything they needed to say. Press play, subscribe, and adjust the volume, because from now on, every whisper could be a test or a trap. Carolina Nogueira was 29 years old when her father's death certificate arrived like a hammer. Highway accident, multiple trauma, body identified by her older brother, a quick wake, a private burial. What should have been mourning became logistics. Her mother, Donna Lucia, and her brother Marcelo spent the following days in registry offices, banks, and whispered phone calls behind half-open doors. On the living room table, spreadsheets. In the hallway, low voices. In Carolina's room, a cell phone that played at dawn and ended the call as soon as she answered. On the screen, restricted number. In her memory, the voice she swore she recognized. "Daughter, I'm fine. Don't trust them." To those looking from the outside, the signs of instability quickly accumulate. Insomnia, loss of appetite, sunken eyes as someone tries to patch up pain with clues. To those looking from the inside, the inconsistencies jump out. The father was methodical, didn't drive at night, avoided that highway on Sundays. And the biggest barb, the closed coffin. Carolina asked to see the body. Her mother repeated like a mantra, "It's not good for you." And yet the inventory ran like someone in a hurry. Carolina's signature was necessary, but a report would suffice to push her away for her own good. When she insisted on seeing the medical records of the alleged accident, Marcelo shouted that it was obsession and persecutory delusion. The following week, the house gained new visitors. A private psychiatrist, family friend, who rated Carolina on 20 minutes and wrote a report in words large enough to intimidate any judge. Between sentences, a plea: try to trust your family, stop answering phone calls in the middle of the night. The problem is that night, the phone rang again, and the voice repeated, trembling, breathless, closer than before. "Daughter, the São Damião Hospital, basement." Carolina didn't sleep. At 6 in the morning, she wrote down on a piece of paper, "São Damião, basement, 3:13 a.m., went downstairs to have coffee and found an ambulance in front of the house. "It's for your own good," her mother said, holding her hand as if consoling and sentencing. The driver wasn't wearing a badge. The nurse avoided her gaze. The psychiatrist signed the form. "Risk to yourself and others." Carolina tried to explain. No one listened. That's how she got into the hospital, and that's how your version came to be called delirium. At São Damião Hospital, the days had no name. The clock on the wall showed hours no one checked, and the sound of the electric gate every morning seemed like a border between the world and oblivion. Carolina was taken to the women's ward, a narrow wing with old tiles, the smell of disinfectant, and the echo of footsteps coming from below, from the basement. The nurse's badge simply said Tanya, and her uniform bore an iodine stain that would not go away. "You'll stay here until you get better," she said, opening a drawer with identification bracelets. Carolina's had only the number 0118, no surname. On the second day, a new doctor, Dr. Nadia, entered the room with a tablet and a practiced smile. She asked quick questions, not listening to the answers. "Do you believe your father is still alive?" Carolina answered yes, and the keyboard clicked before her eyes. Persistent delirium, nocturnal auditory hallucinations, increased medication recommended. She tried to explain the calls, the restricted number, the voice saying the name of the hospital, but the medical record has no room for truths that don't fit into protocols. "If you want to get out of here, stop insisting on this story," the doctor said before leaving. "Sanity was a negotiation. The nights were the worst. At 3:13 a.m., the same time written on the paper, Carolina heard a metallic noise coming from the floor, as if something was running through the pipes or someone was pushing gurneys downstairs. She tried to ask the other patients, but they all looked away. "Don't talk about the basement," whispered one of them, named Vera. "If you talk, you disappear." The next day, Vera's bed was empty. "Transferred," Nurse Tanya informed her, without explaining where. On the attendance register on the wall, her name had been erased with correction fluid. When Carolina asked to call a lawyer, she received a cold response. "Your guardian is your brother, and he didn't authorize it." That's how he realized. Hospitalization was not treatment, it was a sentence. A stamped piece of paper was enough to turn truth into madness. And that night, when the metallic sound returned, she stood up, pressed her ear to the cold floor, and clearly heard a muffled phrase echoing from below. "Daughter, I'm still here." In the third week, Carolina could already distinguish the sound of footsteps. The firm ones were from the nurses, the dragged ones of the sedated patients, and the almost imperceptible ones, those come under the ground. São Damião Hospital had 3 official floors, but the emergency maps on the walls showed only 2, the ground floor and the first. The third floor was a secret everyone pretended didn't exist. Carolina began to observe. She noticed that between 2 and 3 in the morning, the hallway lights would flicker, and a nurse would always disappear with a metal cart, returning 20 minutes later with her hair tied back and a blank look in her eyes. No one explained where she was going. While changing the sheets, Carolina saw something she shouldn't have, an old label sewn into the fabric, with a name crossed out. Patient, Sergio Nogueira. His heart stopped. It was the father's name. He asked Nurse Tanya why that sheet was there, and she answered too quickly, "We reuse old fabrics." But Carolina knew. No one in the Nogueira family had donated anything to the hospital. The next night, she managed to borrow a forgotten badge from the counter and entered through the maintenance wing. The hallway was narrow, full of wires and pipes, with an iron door at the end. A faded sign read "Restricted Access, Sector D." He pulled the doorknob, locked, but behind her, voices, low murmurs, almost prayers, a metallic sound, and then a muffled, distant scream. "You shouldn't be here!" The voice came from behind. It was Dr. Nadia, holding a clipboard, her face illuminated only by the red light from the hallway. "These corridors are not for patients." Carolina tried to explain, but the doctor just typed something on the tablet and called 2 security guards. The report stated escape attempt, institutional conspiracy delusion. Back in her room, strapped to a restraint bed, Carolina heard the metallic sound again, coming straight from the floor. But this time, the voice was clear. It was masculine, faint, but unmistakable. "Don't trust anyone, not even me." 3 days after the incident in the hallway, Carolina was released from restraints. But the punishment was different. Total silence and continuous observation. No mirror, no paper, no pen. Still, she managed to hide a piece of graphite she tore from a power board. Every night, she scratched words on the wall, trying to record dates, voices, sounds. An invisible diary, one only she could understand. One morning during shift change, an older inmate named Aeneas approached discreetly. He'd worked at the hospital for years as a cleaning assistant and seemed to see what others pretended not to notice. "You're from room 11, right? I saw your name on the register. Or rather, I saw it being erased." Carolina stared at him in silence. Aeneas lowered his voice. "There's a place where the old medical records are kept. Downstairs. No one has been there since Dr. Diniz died." That early morning, she followed him to a hidden door behind the laundry room. Aeneas used a set of old keys and pushed the rusty latch. The hallway was damp, smelling of mold and chemicals. Flickering light bulbs revealed cracked walls, exposed pipes, and a ceiling fan that turned slowly, making the air seem to breathe. The end of the hallway, a room filled with stacked boxes, documents, photos, medical reports. Carolina began quickly leafing through the files. Some names caught his attention. Patricia M., heiress of a cosmetics company, judicial internment. Celia B., land dispute, psychotic condition. Andre C., family quarrel, paranoid disorder. All with something in common: legal interdiction and sudden disappearance. It was then that she found an unlabeled folder covered in dust. Inside, a medical record with her father's name on it: Sergio Nogueira, date of admission 2001, diagnosis severe dissociative disorder, legal guardian Marcelo Nogueira, last update transferred to Sector D 3:13 a.m. Carolina felt her legs fail her. The metallic sound of the stretchers echoed in the hallway as if responding to the reading. When he raised his head, Aeneas was no longer there. In its place, a red light flashed on the ceiling and an alarm blared in the distance. Someone knew she was there. And the scariest thing, at the bottom of the chart, in faded blue ink, was written by hand, "I'm still here, daughter. Daddy." The morning after the discovery, Carolina woke to the smell of smoke. The siren blared at irregular intervals, and the hallways were filled with nurses running in silence, a kind of rehearsed cold panic without screams. "Fire in the basement," someone said, but the expressions weren't of alarm. They were of relief, as if something that shouldn't exist was finally being destroyed. Carolina ran to the barred bedroom window and saw dark smoke rising from the opposite side of the courtyard. She recognized the building. It was the same one where the archives were located. "They're burning everything," she murmured, and her heart began to pound. Minutes later, the psychiatrist in charge entered the room with a practiced smile. "You must be scared, Carolina. It was a short circuit, nothing serious." She stood up, trembling. "You're erasing the evidence. My father was here." The doctor approached slowly, holding a clipboard. "These delusions are coming back, aren't they? Let's increase the medication." But before he could finish writing, Carolina reached out and showed him the folded document she had hidden under the mattress, Sergio Nogueira's medical records. The doctor turned pale. "Where did you get that from?" She replied firmly, "From the place where you buried the truth." That night, while the smoke still hung over the hallways, Carolina tried to hide the paper inside a pillowcase. But at dawn, the medical record was gone. In its place, just a note written in pen on the pillow. "Nothing you saw exists." Hours later, the hospital officially announced that the fire had destroyed all files prior to 2005. No investigation would be opened, no authorities were present, no press was informed. Carolina realized that now there was no more evidence, only memories. But maybe that would be enough. The next morning, a metallic crack echoed from underground. She looked out the window and saw the access door opening by itself. A light flashed, like a call, and for an instant he was sure he heard that voice again. 3:13, daughter. This is your last chance." That night, the entire hospital seemed to hold its breath. The courtyard lights flickered as if something was interfering with the power. Carolina waited for the clock to tick. 13, the time that had haunted his nightmares since day one. The metallic sound came again, coming from the ground, but this time she didn't stand still. She managed to open the bedroom lock with a hairpin and walked barefoot down the hallway, the icy floor burning her feet. At the end of the hallway, the sign "Restricted Access, Sector D" was partially melted, perhaps from the recent fire. He pushed open the door. The smell of rust and ash filled the air. The hallway was narrow, almost claustrophobic. The lamps hung on crooked wires, casting shadows that seemed to move. Drag marks on the floor, perhaps stretchers, perhaps something worse. Carolina walked slowly, her heart hammering in her chest. At one point, the walls were covered with pen and ink notes, short, shaky sentences like desperate notes. They wouldn't let me leave. Silence heals. Sign and sleep. Further ahead, he found a partially destroyed room. Inside, burned medical records with illegible names and old photographs, patients in chains, electroshock experiments, dates dating back to the 2000s. In the corner, a stretcher covered by a sheet. Carolina approached. Under the cloth, a motionless silhouette. With trembling hands, he pulled at the fabric. The body was pale, the hair was grey, and the face was her father. Eyes open, glazed, fixed on the ceiling. But something was wrong. The body didn't smell of decay. It was as if it had been preserved. Next to it, a tube connected to a machine plugged into the socket. The monitor blinked faintly, as if there was still a signal. "Father?" he whispered. The man's eyes moved almost imperceptibly, and a hoarse voice escaped from the dry lips. "They never let me out, daughter." Carolina recoiled in shock, dropping a metal tray. The sound echoed through the hallway. The lights flashed brightly. An alarm started ringing, and hurried footsteps came from behind her. "She's down!" a male voice shouted. Carolina ran, but the path seemed to multiply. Identical doors, endless corridors, the sound of stretchers being pushed in the dark. When he tried to return to the stairs, the entrance had disappeared. At that moment she understood. Sector didn't take it back up. The alarm blared like a war siren. Doors slammed, voices echoed through the speakers, and Carolina ran amid smoke and flashing lights. Suddenly, a figure in a lab coat pulled her into a side room. It was Aeneas, the employee she thought was dead. "Quick, before they see you," he whispered. The room was small, cluttered with screens and cables. An old monitoring system with cameras showing various points of the hospital was installed. "The fire didn't destroy everything," he said, plugging in a flash drive. On the screen, black and white images began to play. Old dates, silent recordings. Carolina saw patients being carried away on covered stretchers, always at 3:13 in the morning. In one of the videos, she recognized herself, unconscious, surrounded by nurses, but the detail that froze her was the reflection of a man walking behind the group. The face was that of the father. She turned to Aeneas, astonished. "Do you understand what this means?" He just shook his head. "It means no one will believe it." Before she could react, the screens began to turn off by themselves, one by one, until only one image remained. The basement room where she had seen her father. On the stretcher, the body was still there. But now there was someone standing beside him, a woman in a white lab coat holding a clipboard. The camera automatically zoomed. Era Carolina. She stood, still, the blood running cold in her veins. "This is a setup. I never—" he tried to say, but Aeneas backed away, scared. "They record everything. They repeat everything, until the truth loses its meaning." At that moment, the door was broken down. Security guards entered and forcefully restrained Carolina. The flash drive fell to the floor and broke in two. In the hospital report, the record was short and cold. Patient presented with a severe dissociative episode. She claimed to have seen herself in non-existent videos. Hours later, the video files were officially lost due to technical failure, and the monitoring room sealed, but a copy escaped. Days later, an anonymous journalist received a manila envelope with the hospital's seal and a single handwritten sentence: "See what happens at 3:13. 3 weeks after the alleged outbreak, Carolina Nogueira's name was removed from the São Damião Hospital records. The family claimed she had run away during a routine transport. No police report was filed. No newspaper reported it. No doctor signed off on her discharge. But in the corridors among the employees, a rumor grew quietly. Someone had seen a woman in a white apron walking in Sector D, talking to herself, calling out a name no one understood. Months later, the hospital closed for renovations. The windows were boarded up, the cameras removed, and all internal files were digitized and transferred for legal review. However, on an obscure online forum, an 18-second video began circulating. Grainy image, security camera, illegible date. It showed the basement corridor. In the corner of the screen, Carolina appears entering the room where she saw her father. The light flashes, and then another figure appears, lying on the stretcher. But when the camera zooms in, the face in the sheet, it's her own. The video ends with a noise and a black screen. At the bottom, a fixed time, 03:13 sure. Experts said the video was a montage. The hospital denied the existence of any recordings. The family declined to comment, but a former employee in an anonymous interview said something that made the internet freeze. After that night, they started receiving internal calls from the extension in room 11, the same room where Carolina slept before she disappeared. And you know what's weird? The reporter asked what. The man took a deep breath and replied, "This room was demolished in the fire." Carolina Nogueira's case was never officially investigated, and São Damião Hospital never reopened. But at 3:13 a.m., there are still those who swear they hear the phone ring. Would you answer?